Hermvids with Mr. Hermit. Educational videos about reading and writing. When I was a kid, I really enjoyed the poetry of Shel Silverstein. He was a poet who actually was also a songwriter who wrote songs for Johnny Cash. But he made these books like Light in the Attic and Where the Sidewalk Ends. He also wrote The Giving Tree. And he used a lot of humor in his poetry. And that's what appealed to me about all the stuff he wrote. It was kind of aimed at kids too, because there was some sillier, more absurd stuff. This unit is going to be all about using humor in your poetry, and we're going to take a look at a few examples of poems that use different types of humor, so you can find one that more relates to you and your sensibilities, and then use it in your own poetry writing. Now, when I say humor, I don't necessarily mean it's got to be filled with jokes. It doesn't have to make the person laugh. It's more of a way to relate whatever subject that you're getting at. You can use humor to show how ridiculous the human existence is. You can use humor to show something innocent about childhood or how dark things are. Humor is just another way of relating your theme. So let's take a look at a few examples of different types of humor used in poetry. First off, we got silly humor. And this goes back to my first example from Shel Silverstein. Something that is silly has like a childlike goofiness to it. It can add absurdity like SpongeBob SquarePants. Silly is not always taken very seriously, but it still can be lighthearted and fun. This example is called Smart by Shel Silverstein. My dad gave me $1 bill, 'cause I'm his smartest son. And I swapped it for 2 shiny quarters, 'cause 2 is more than 1. Then I took the quarters and traded them to Lou for 3 dimes. I guess you don't know that 3 is more than 2. Just then along came old blind Bates. And just 'cause he can't see, he gave me 4 nickels for my 3 dimes, and 4 is more than 3. And I took the nickels to Hiram Coombs down at the seed feed store, and the fool gave me 5 pennies for 'em. And 5 is more than 4. And then I went and showed my dad, and he got red in the cheeks and closed his eyes and shook his head, too proud of me to speak. So this is silly because it's like a little kid misunderstanding money, and he does silly things with it. It's lighthearted. If that's you, maybe you should use silly humor in your poetry. Dark humor is a little different. Dark humor usually makes fun of something more serious, and at the end you're thinking, I don't know if this is necessarily something I should be laughing at, perhaps. It can make fun of dark situations like death or depression, but dark humor usually puts some sort of comedic spin on it. This poem is called Love Song, I and Thou by Alan Dugan, and he compares marriage to crucifixion here. So if you find that amusing, then you might like this type of poetry. You can pause the video and read it to yourself, because I don't feel comfortable reading the bad words. Self-deprecating humor is when you're making fun of yourself, but in that you allow the audience to laugh at you. The Before Life by Franz Wright is an example of this, and you can pause and read this one as well. Maybe self-deprecating humor is something that you use in your own life. It's another way of being humble. You make fun of yourself in everyday conversation, and it can make people feel more comfortable around you, but it can also express some sort of inner doubt that you have. It's another way to add humor to your poetry. Absurd humor is a little different. It aims to reveal how meaningless most of human existence is by expressing how ridiculous normal human interactions are. It makes it almost nonsensical. Kind of like silliness, except it has kind of a point. It's like silliness, but the silliness reveals how ridiculous we all are. A poem I really like by Richard Brautigan is called The Flower Burgers, Part 4. Baudelaire opened up a hamburger stand in San Francisco, but he put flowers between the buns. People would come in and say, "Give me a hamburger with plenty of onions on it." Baudelaire would give them a flower burger instead, and the people would say, "What kind of hamburger stand is this?" The idea is itself absurd, It pokes fun at consumerism, eating meat, all that good stuff, maybe the hippie movement as well. It's another way to add some humor. There's also satirical poetry, which we're not going to go into here, but if you're interested in the humor of Stephen Colbert, I would recommend Googling satire poems, and you can find some good stuff. To review, there's absurd humor, self-deprecating humor, dark humor, and silly humor. Pick one that best suits you and try out a poem using that humor.